the Pitcher Nail Down. I'm Jason Gilbo, JGilbo11. With me is Spencer Limbach at Spencer_JL. Taking a look at pitching on today's Friday slate here, and it's jam-packed, and we're talking about pricing for a lot of these guys, and a lot of guys on DraftKings priced much higher than they usually are, and it kind of creates a little bit of a log jam up top.
Yeah, and especially you consider that there's a high-scoring game in Colorado tonight where you're probably going to want some exposure to those expensive hitters. And then, I mean, with the pitchers priced up, a lot of decisions have to be made there with lineup construction. So we're going to try and help you get through it. On FanDuel, there's a little more breathing room in terms with well-priced or attractively priced pitchers, I should say. So a little bit more to work with there, but we'll break it all down for you.
Yeah, and jumping right into things here, you got Tigers and Yankees in Yankee Stadium, over under 9.5. New York minus 128 favorites, Mike Pelfrey versus CC Sabathia. And we're talking about Coors, and I think outside of Coors, I think this one kind of comes in as, really the second best game on both sides to kind of target. I'm not a Sabathia believer that he's really turned it around. There's nothing really for me indicating that the success is going to continue. And obviously, even with those Yankees bats being relatively mediocre for most of the season, I'm kind of all over them against Pelfrey.
Yeah, and Pelfrey, he coming into this season or even last season, he had some reverse splits. He was a little more generous to righties. That has since changed over the last season and a half. He allows a 371 WOBA to those left-handed bats. So you kind of like McCann, Beltran, Ellsbury, Gardner, all those lefties, especially in Yankee Stadium with that short porch in right field. So, targeting them where you can get them, that's certainly the approach to this game. I'm not on either of the pitchers. It's more of, who should I target against these guys? Obviously, CC Sabathia hasn't really been bad this season. Looks to be kind of a mediocre pitcher that you don't really click into your FanDuel lineup, but you don't target heavily against him. Obviously, Detroit has a lot of power right-handed bats that could give him fits tonight. But, it's tough to work some of them in. You can look at Victor Martinez. You can look at J.D. Martinez. Nick Castellanos, I think, is a sneaky pick tonight. But in the grand scheme of things, I just think there's better picks at every position rather than those Detroit bats. So I'm more looking for the Yankee hitters in this game.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you look at the Tigers' bats against left-hand pitching, even with all those righties, haven't been that great this year. And I think they are more reserved for GPPs. Next game here, you got the Phillies and Nationals, Jeremy Hellickson versus Steven Strasburg. Washington, monster favorites, minus 258 here, over under 7.5. I look at this and I think if I'm paying up at pitcher, I think Strasburg's kind of that guy in that range that I like quite a bit. The K upside's been there this season, and you look at him against the Phillies. One, he's the biggest favorite on the slate as well. It's a little bit different story from Kershaw, who's going to be battling Cueto. You kind of need that win at that price. You need him to check off all those boxes. And Strasburg, for me, just kind of does that in comparison to all those guys kind of above 11K for me.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. He's a little bit cheaper than Kershaw. A minus 260 favorite against the Phillies. So easy path for the win there. Should get plenty of run support. You don't really know if that's going to be the case for Kershaw. You have to figure they have similar strikeout upside. Kershaw's will be dampened a little bit by San Francisco, kind of a pesky hitting team. And then Philadelphia, we know they rank bottom 5 in almost every offensive metric. So the only thing that has me a little bit reserved with Strasburg is that he doesn't really last long into outings. You're looking at 6 innings over his past 5 games. And he ended up last Saturday with kind of a calf strain. They said it wasn't much of an issue. He still struck out 10 hitters in 5 in the third innings against Cincinnati. And you figure it wouldn't be much of an issue against Philadelphia. But if they get up early, they might leave Strasburg or pull him out, I should say, after about 90 or so pitches, which should still be 5 to 6 innings, but in a quality start with a good chance at a win. But don't expect him to go really deep into the game. He still could provide 50-plus fantasy points, but it's just something to kind of weigh in the back of your mind as kind of a tiebreaker.
Yeah, that's a good point. It is a different story from Kershaw, who's super efficient. This guy throws 10, 12 pitches an inning. going to go 7+ no matter what it seems. And I think, the strikeout rate against the Giants is something that has me kind of off of it at their price. They don't strike out a ton. And at that price, you kind of need him to get that 8+ strikeouts and go deep in a game and really pay that off and really pick up the win. So in comparison, obviously Kershaw is still a viable option, but I think I'm just going to be going different ways.
And then I would also like to
next game here, you got the Cardinals and Pirates.
One more thing on that. On DraftKings, their price is a little more similar, so I could be leaning towards Kershaw there. But for the $1,000 difference on FanDuel, I think Strasburg is a better pick for cheaper.
Yeah, it's 400, 500 on DK, so it is a little bit different story. Next game here, you got the Cardinals and Pirates. Michael Walker versus Garrett Cole. Over/under of 8. Pittsburgh -134 favorites. Pittsburgh has a surprisingly high total. I guess it's not really that surprising if you look how Walker has pitched this year. I'm not on either of these guys. I don't think there's really enough upside for both of them. Both of these offenses are in the top 10 for me, and it's just kind of overall, it kind of looks like a stay-away game on a full slate.
Yeah, it really does. And, you mentioned Walker has kind of been struggling this season. The only thing that intrigues me is Andrew McCutchen and Starling Marte's prices. I think 3.1K, 3.2K respectively on FanDuel. Has me a little bit enticed there just because they are so cheap. But that's more of a GBP kind of if everything fits sort of play. Otherwise, I'm not really looking at anyone. Garrett Cole, his strikeout rate has really vanished this season somehow, some way. I don't really know what's going on there, but I think both of these pitchers are easy to stay away from tonight. Yeah,
definitely. And moving on here to this next one, you have the Orioles and Blue Jays. Kevin Gausman versus Marco Estrada. 8.5 over/under. Both of these offenses, obviously carry a ton of power. But, overall, have been fairly boom or bust this season. On DraftKings, kind of what caught my eye was those Blue Jays price tags for the hitters. And Gausman, can be home run prone against righties at times. And I think, once again, this is, as far as pitching goes on this slate, it's kind of a stay away, especially at Estrada's price tag. That's insane.
Right. Estrada's like, what, 10-7 or something on DraftKings?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's 8-3 on FanDuel, so a little bit of a merit for a GPP play there because he has been really good lately, working deep into games, 8 innings or so, against some pretty decent lineups like the Yankees, Red Sox. He's pinned them down pretty well. Granted, this is a tough matchup in a hitter-friendly ballpark, but, that's kind of been the usual for Estrada lately, and he's handled it very well. So a little bit GPP merit for 8.3. Obviously, some risk associated there. He's not at the top of my list, or the top 2 tiers, I should say. But if you're filling out multiple entries, I kind of like that on DraftKings or FanDuel, I should say, just to kind of be different.
Because I do think, you're looking at that price tier. McCullers is probably going to carry some eye-popping ownership numbers. Same with Harvey. So, I see that as kind of a swerve off of those two.
Yeah, just if you're trying to be different, really. He doesn't have bad upside, but the risk is a little higher than those other guys you mentioned.
Yeah. Next game here, you got the A's and Reds. Sonny Gray versus Anthony Desclafani. Over/under of 9. Oakland -116 favorites. Sonny Gray looked, much better than he has this season against Houston in that last start. Obviously, first one off the DL. Still not a guy, even at the price tag on DraftKings, that I feel comfortable rostering at this point, especially in that ballpark. The Reds offense, has shown a little bit of life of late. Coming off that Coors series, obviously, but they kind of carried over. Wainwright, pretty successful outing there. I still think it's just a stay-away situation for pitchers here.
Yeah, it's a stay-away for both these guys. Sonny Gray would be the more attractive option, but he's kind of been dealing with a back injury, forced him to miss a start a couple of weeks ago. And that's not something you really get over in a short amount of time. So you have to figure there's some lingering effects there. And then the fact that he hasn't been pitching well, it's a hitter-friendly ballpark. The price is, not as cheap as you want it to be. Just really looks like an all-around stay away.
Yeah, and Desclafani, he's a guy who's struggled with lefties in his time, and you look at this Oakland offense, who's have a fair amount of them. I know Valencia and Chris Davis are a little bit banged up, but I still think there's not a ton of upside or anything really worthy for me. Even though, some of those Brewers guys tamed this A's offense, I still don't think it's a viable option.
Yeah, and he's coming off of oblique injury too. This is his first start of the year, so you have to figure he might be on a pitch count, or I mean, might not be as effective as he was last season when we saw him really kind of get into a groove in the middle of the season. But neither of these guys really promote much confidence tonight.
Yeah. Next game here, you got the Astros and Rays in Tropicana. Houston's small favorites. I mean, -114. Over under 7.5. Lance McCullers versus Matt Andriese. And McCullers, I mean, you and I were both in agreement before. I mean, we like him a lot against this Rays team that's really, I mean, against right-handed pitching, haven't done much this season. And they also carry a big 25% strikeout rate. So McCullers has that upside. And relatively, I mean, that DK price is a little higher than I'd like it to be. FanDuel-wise, I like that a lot.
Yeah, you have to love the price point on FanDuel, 8,800. That's a lot less than where he should be. I think he's more accurately priced on DraftKings, upwards of 11K. I think it's 10 something over there. But I mean, he's a minor favorite tonight on the road. I think -115 is his money line. Still has a decent chance at the win. Tampa, they've really been kind of in a funk lately. They had, I think it was last month, they scored like 10-plus runs in a couple straight games against Toronto. Other than that, their offense really hasn't done much this entire season. So McCullers, his past 4 starts, 23 innings pitched, 33 strikeouts. So that's the strikeout upside that we're looking at tonight. You have to really like that, especially in GPPs. The thing I'm kind of wrestling with is similarly priced pitching options. You're looking at Jason Hamill for 800 more on FanDuel. If you could float that, he has kind of an easier path at a win. We'll talk about him a little more in a bit, but it's kind of the give and take that you're looking at there. I certainly don't mind McCullers, especially given that strikeout upside if he works in your lineup.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Andriese on the other side, I mean, he's a guy who he doesn't miss a lot of bats for me to really use him here, even though Houston has a relatively high strikeout rate. Once again, I just think he kind of gets lost on such a big slate.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Next one here, you got the Cubs and Braves, Jason Hamill versus Bud Norris. Over-under of 8. Your second highest favorites here on the night, Chicago 231 favorites. And Hamill, I mean, he's a guy who's site dependent here because FanDuel, I mean, he's a safer option and kind of a guy you can pay down and look at to get some of those Coors bats in. DraftKings, it's a little bit different story. 11-1. That's deep for a guy who's facing a Brave team that, yes, they're bad, but they don't allow a ton of strikeouts to right-handed pitchers.
Yeah, the thing here with Hamill is security that you're looking at because he's a -235 favorite. You have to figure the Cubs will give him a lot of run support tonight. And he has an ERA just a little bit north of 2, and that's pretty indicative to how well he's been pitching lately. Atlanta, even though they don't have a tremendous strikeout rate for a bad hitting team, I mean, they really don't do any damage, especially in a pitcher-friendly ballpark like Atlanta there. So I think he's just an extremely safe pick to go for about 40-plus fantasy points on FanDuel. DraftKings, I'll likely stay away. I just don't see any upside for what he costs over there. I'd rather go up or down in salary from him there. But DraftKings, I mean, FanDuel, he's firmly within consideration.
Yeah, definitely. Next one here, you got the Royals and White Sox, Ian Candy versus Chris Sale. And here we are. We kind of get to a tier where Chris Sale's kind of smashed in between a couple of options below him and also above him. This was kind of, I mean, last time we were looking at Danny Salazar against this Royals team who, I mean, went relatively overlooked in comparison to other guys. And I think this could be a similar situation. You look at Sale, I mean, he threw pretty well against them this season. He didn't get the win in that start, so that is something to consider. And I think that's going to be one thing that on FanDuel I kind of stay away. But DraftKings, I'm a little bit more intrigued at 11-8, just because the win's not as much needed there.
Yeah, he's certainly a GPP pivot away from Strasburg, Kershaw, kind of in a tier between those guys and McCuller and the pitchers you're going to get a discount for. So definitely a swerve play, not a guy I'm considering in single entry tournaments or anything like that or cash games. But yeah, Kansas City, they're really kind of an overrated offense. Everyone's still carrying over the mantra from last season that, this club, they don't strike out much. They make pitchers work deep in the count. They just get timely hits and they frustrate pitchers, but that's not their case at this point in the season. They're kind of banged up. Some of the guys are pulled. They haven't really found a rhythm as of late. So I kind of like Chris Sale just for that reason, but he's definitely more of a swerve play than kind of a top priority play.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, the White Sox offense isn't really no better. Ian Keddy can be a little bit home run prone at times. We've seen him throw some decent starts, but on this slate, I think once again he kind of gets overlooked. I think he's more kind of to be talked about because, Sale and the White Sox are sizable favorites, but how likely is it in comparison to some of these other that Sale is going to be really heavily favored to get a win?
Yeah, I mean that's just something that you have to weigh there. I mean he's a minus 155 favorite, so not great odds that we're used to seeing with him. So just kind of looking at that, balancing it back and forth.
Yeah. Next game here, you got the Mets and Brewers. Matt Harvey versus Junior Guerra. Over/under of 8. Mets minus 119 favorites. I mean, both these guys are in play for me. And you're looking at Guerra. I mean, DraftKings wise, is an SP2. He's a cheaper option. You look at this Mets team that's banged up. I mean, bottom 10 over the last 2 weeks in WOBA, 26% strikeout rate in that span. So, no David Wright. A lot of their other options are struggling. I think he's kind of a viable option as far as GPPs, just as a salary relief play.
Yeah, that's the way I wrote him up. I think if you're going cheap, he is the cheapest I would actually look to, and that's only in tournaments, obviously, because the Mets are struggling lately. There's holes in their lineup. Granted, there still is risk. This is a hitter-friendly ballpark in Milwaukee. Guerrera, I mean, he has been good. He showed promise at times this season, but he's still kind of an inexperienced pitcher who could give it up at any certain point and pitching in that hitter-friendly park. You think the Mets could get back on track any given game now. So that's the risk associated with him. On the other side, Matt Harvey, a little bit discounted due to his inconsistencies lately. In Milwaukee's kind of a top 5 strikeout team, so there's a little bit of upside with him. We've seen it like every third start or so. It seems that Matt Harvey goes off and twirls a gem. He did it again at San Diego early last month, and then kind of the last week of May, he did it against the White Sox. So I know it really doesn't fit the pattern of like 3 bad ones, then 1 good one, but there is a chance we could see some upside against Milwaukee.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously he was kind of that tough luck loser in his last start against Miami, and I mean, Miami's been respectable offense. They haven't struck out a ton. Still, I mean, back-to-back games with 7 innings is encouraging. 6 hits allowed in that span with one earned run. And as you mentioned, Milwaukee strikes out quite a bit against righties. So I think you could see an upside that's closer to that Chicago start that he had. So I think he's a viable GPP option. I like him quite a bit at the price tag. Hard for me to still trust him in cash games, even as an SP2. I still rather kind of get some safety there.
Here's the dilemma, though. I mean, he's pretty much the same price as Lance McCullers on FanDuel. So I would probably lean towards McCullers. I think you're of the same mentality there. Would you roll out McCullers in a cash game, per se?
I think so, because one, it's a better ballpark as far as Tropicana, and I really do see Houston, even though favorites aren't really that different between with Vegas. I see Houston kind of coming out on top in that one more so than I can see the Mets, thrashing Junior and kind of picking up some run support for Harvey.
Right.
Next one here, you got the Red Sox and Twins, and Stephen Wright going up against your boys.
Can we skip to the next game? I don't really want to. I don't want to go through the pain of talking about this.
Double-digit strikeouts, yes or no?
It's possible. It's on the table. I mean, Minnesota is just one of those teams that they're playing a little bit better lately, but they really don't handle finesse pitchers very well. And Stephen Wright is kind of the definition of that with his knuckleball. Not any overpowering stuff. And this is really the first time Minnesota's seen it in pretty much about a year, I would say. So, I mean, yeah, they didn't see R.A. Dickey when he was in town. I just really think some of those young Minnesota hitters are just going to be confused by the knuckleball, and this could be a really sneaky good outing for Stephen Wright.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy, difference of sites. 9,200 on FanDuel. I think he's a viable GPP option. DK, he's the fourth most expensive pitcher at 12-2. A little bit crazy, but I think a lot of people are still going to overlook right on DraftKings. And you know what? I really do think he could. Homer-wise, you might call me that, but I do think he can outscore a Kluber or a Chris Sale at similar price tags.
Yeah, I really think he is a good GPP option here. You have to love that he works deep in the game. Sometimes they'll let him go 110-plus pitches without issue just because he's throwing that knuckleball, not really fatiguing his arm too much. And I'm really trying hard. The fan in me is trying hard to envision a way that Minnesota, puts up 3-4 runs at least against Stephen Wright, and it's just not happening to me. The realist in me is coming out and can't see it.
Yeah. Obviously, on the other side, Tyler Duffy not really in play. And, Target Field a little bit better than I do. But, in the summer months, it's not really the pitcher park that it is in comparison to kind of the colder months.
Yeah, the ball carries as it starts to warm up, and it's really starting to warm up in the Midwest. I can kind of attest to that just by going outside earlier this morning. It's like 95 degrees out. So,
yeah. So I think those Red Sox bats, a little expensive, but they are back in play outside of coming back from the Bay Area.
Yeah.
Next one here, you got the Padres and Rockies. Andrew Cashner versus John Gray. Over under at 12 here. Colorado minus 191 favorites. Obviously, you expect kind of the Rockies to pull away with a win here. Gray's been dominant against the Padres this year. Double-digit strikeouts in both starts. Obviously, they were both away from home. He's, showcased some success in cores. Obviously not those types of numbers, but I actually like him as kind of a GPP. I think people will probably toss some shares at him, but definitely going to be a lower-owned arm here.
Yeah, I want some shares of him too. I'm really looking at Jason Hamill, Lance McCullers, and John Gray are the three guys I have firmly on my board, especially in tournaments. Obviously not in cash games for John Gray, but I'm really of the mentality that I want to build stacks. There's a lot of great hitters. There's a lot of great high-scoring teams out there that I want to get exposure to. So that's the route that I'm going. A little bit cheaper at pitcher, fading the Kershaws, fading the Strasburgs, hoping the bats can make up for that, and hoping I can get some upside out of those guys. And Gray has really shown it, especially against San Diego. They've been able to do pretty much nothing against him. He's had some awesome strikeout rates. Granted, both of those games were at San Diego, but 23 strikeouts in 2 games, 13 innings. That's insane. You have to figure some of that will carry over. He has pitched some gems in Coors Field. Obviously, there's a little bit of risk if he doesn't have his top-tier stuff. Those mistakes could be exposed. That's always the risk that comes with Coors Field. But strikeout rate's there. His price is really cheap. The matchup, other than considering the hitter-friendly park, is right there. So he makes for a very intriguing tournament play. Yeah,
definitely. The Padres, you look at them, fourth highest strikeout rate against right-handed pitching. Yes, they're going to get a small Coors bump there, but this still isn't a good offense. We've seen Gray dominate them before, and I'm with you. I just think he's a guy, I'm willing to overlook Coors for it and take some shots with. Next one here, you got Chase Field at 9.5 over/under. 2 lefties on the hill. Justin Nicolino versus Patrick Corbin. I'm here in Phoenix, and it's 100 plus, and you look at these two offenses with 2 average lefties on the hill, and I think this is going to be a relatively high-scoring game.
Yeah, I'm definitely picking my spots against these guys. I think there's some cheap ways you can get exposure to this game. Arizona, aside from Colorado's easily one of the highest-scoring teams of the night, but then you have kind of a little logjam of the Yankees, the Red Sox, and the Diamondbacks, all with over 5-run totals tonight. So those are 3 very sneaky stacks. Or I shouldn't say sneaky compared to Colorado, but very plausible stacks within that. So I'm looking at the right-handers both sides here. Chris Johnson of Miami is kind of a sneaky guy. He's first base listed at FanDuel, minimum salary, hit a home run in his last games, a platoon option there. I kind of like to plug him in there, and that kind of helps me get some stacks around that, even if I want to pay up that pitcher a little bit.
Yeah. One question: does Stanton homer tonight?
No.
Still no. Man.
No, because I watched that whole series of him against Minnesota. Granted, one game he hit like 3 balls to the warning track very hard, but the next game he struck out like 4 out of 5 at bats. He doesn't look right.
Yes.
It's not the same Stanton. It's some diluted version who should probably take a week off or maybe do a rehab stint just to salvage something.
Yeah, something is definitely up. You obviously look at a lot of those righties, and as you mentioned, Johnson. Outside that, you got Prado, Real Muto, Ozuna. So it's a lot of right-handed bats for Corbin to handle, and obviously neither of those guys are in play.
Right.
Getting into later games here, you got the Indians and Angels. Corey Kluber versus Hector Santiago. Over under 7.5. Cleveland minus 125 favorites. You kind of look at this Angels team. They've kind of been a little bit stronger of late. They're still capable of being shut down, obviously, because that back half of the lineup's not really that strong. When Kluber's on, he's on, and I think kind of regardless of a really low strikeout rate, I think even more so Kluber's going to be the lower under that top tier.
Yeah, he's only 9,600 on FanDuel. I think you can plausibly pivot from a guy like Jason Hamill upwards, or a guy like the Strasburg Kershaw downward, and kind of expect maybe a similar performance. Obviously, that's more of a tournament strategy. He will have a low ownership rate against the Angels, pitcher-friendly ballpark. And as we've said all year, or maybe for the past 3 years, if you handle Pujols, if you handle Trout, you can navigate this lineup pretty easily. And I think Kluber is really capable of that.
Yeah, definitely. And on the other side, I think they can reasonably get him, a decent amount of run support because, one, Hector Santiago's been awful against right-handed bats. And I know that Cleveland, obviously guys like Kitten Lindor actually hits better from the right side. So it's kind of a bump up for guys like Napoli and Rajai Davis there.
Yeah, in Santiago, I don't think we've seen a steeper decline just over the midst of this season. He was awesome to open the season, but the past month or so has just been a completely different story. He's been getting hammered, so that'll probably continue tonight.
Yeah, that home ballpark, pretty favorable for pitchers, but it hasn't helped him either. Next one here, you got Texas and Seattle in Safeco, 7.5 over under. Seattle minus 149 favorites. Derek Holland versus Hisashi Iwakuma. This game, for me, I'm just kind of crossing off the list altogether. You got some guys here in spots, but I just like way too many options better as far as hitters and pitchers go.
Right. This is just if you see someone you like, they fit good in your lineup as like a last little filler. You definitely go with them. You're not opposed to that, but at the same time, you're not actively pursuing any hitters or either of these pitchers. If anything, you're looking at maybe a couple Seattle righties against Holland. Obviously, Cruz had that huge game. Was that yesterday or 2 days ago? We had a 2 homers.
2 days ago, I believe, yeah.
Yeah, so, you like that righty-lefty matchup, maybe Franklin Gutierrez, if you can get him for cheap. But Holland, he really doesn't get blown up for having a high WOBA split against right-handers. He actually navigates that pretty well and doesn't give up too many runs despite giving up those hits. So, this is something that you're just kind of err more on the side of caution and not really actively pursue.
Yeah, because you look at that last game. He threw 7 innings, 2 earned against Seattle, and that was at home. And as you mentioned, he doesn't really have that blow-up factor, and it kind of hinders a lot of other guys in that lineup. He goes 6 innings and maybe allows 3 earned with a homer or something. It's all about just kind of finding that bat that does the damage against them. And on the other side, Hisashi Iwakuma, been up and down this year, not really in play for me against this Texas offense.
Right. Especially for that price, 9,000 on FanDuel, I think you can get a lot better. You can go with Hamill, you can go with McCullers, RV even maybe. We listed a lot of other guys in that price range that I feel more comfortable with. Yeah,
definitely. Last game of the night here, you got the Dodgers and Giants over under a 5.5 in AT&T Park. Clayton Kershaw versus Johnny Cueto. This one, Kershaw's, the usually highest price pitcher on the slate, and that's how it is again. Strikeout upset for me against the Giants is just something I don't usually see here. And that's been the case with him. Yes, he's thrown relatively well against them, 15 innings and 2 starts, but only 11 Ks in that time. And they're a guy who have seen him a numerous amount of times. They kind of know his ways. Not that they're going to do anything against him, but it's more of his upside in comparison to his other starts.
Right, and that with a huge salary, that's really hard to fit in with a lot of great offense and expensive hitters that are worthy of their salary tonight. It just makes for the recipe that you don't have to go with Kershaw, and you can feel really, pretty confident or relatively more confident than usual by not clicking him in and going with someone cheaper, building stacks around that. So that's the strategy that I'm going to have tonight. I don't know if it's going to bite me, but I feel pretty confident in it going in that Kershaw's not going to have his 65, 70 fantasy point game. Speaking with FanDuel scoring against a team like San Francisco, a lot of pesky hitters. They see him often. And he's not even a guarantee for the win tonight because Johnny Cueto on the other side is a pretty dang good pitcher himself, and he did really well against the Dodgers in his last start. 7 innings at LA, 3 hits, 7 strikeouts. So, I mean, you have to give some consideration to Cueto. I know he's not really in line for the win going against Kershaw, but he's going to be very low owned, and if something happens, Kershaw gives up 2, maybe 3 runs, heaven forbid, and Cueto can kind of sneak through there with maybe only giving up 1. He could sneak out with a win. I mean, San Francisco's at home, and stranger things have happened, so he'll be very low owned, and I think that's a sneaky tournament pick.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, since that started, at Cincinnati, I mean, he's been awesome. I mean, two earns or less. I mean, in that span, going up to tonight, and the price tag is a little heavier than I want on DraftKings. But FanDuel, I mean, I don't mind it as kind of a really deep swerve off because I'm with you. I think he's going to be low owned just because the win's really uncertain, but it's uncertain for both of them. And I kind of think, if he matches a couple other guys, it's definitely not a bad move.
Yeah.
So. It's not like that Dodgers offense has been really anything to kind of shy away from this year either.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the way they're playing right now, some of their main bats really aren't doing much. They're leaving it to kind of the peripheral guys to pick up the slack. So, not really scared of that offense right now.
Yeah, definitely not. That's going to wrap things up here with the Pitcher Nail Down. Be sure to check out dailyfantasycafe.com for all our great tools and content.